Thank you very much. Yes, so as Natalie said, I'm the NBN Atlas Data Manager. I work for the NBN Trust, and I look after all the data providers who share their records on the NBN Atlas and the NBN Atlas Scotland. I help them format their data for upload and support them in ongoing when there are any queries with their records. I also support the Atlas, so I help users trying to access records, advise users on how to use the records, along with a colleague, Katie, as well. So there are two of us who do that. And what I thought I'd do is I've got a presentation of about 20 minutes going through the NBN Atlas and the data flow, and sort of trying to introduce just a few concepts that we can then look at when we do the demonstration on the Atlas, the Scottish Atlas itself. What I thought I'd do is do the presentation, and then if you've got any questions, we can go through them then. And then if there's anything that you'd specifically like to know how to do on the Atlas, you could ask me then, and we can do that as part of the demonstration. In fact, actually, so that was my outline. So yes, so as I said, I work for the NBN Trust. We're the charity that supports and promotes the collection, curation and sharing of the UK's biodiversity data. And the Trust facilitates the National Biodiversity Network that champions data recording and the recording community. We also manage the NBN Atlas, the NBN Atlas Scotland, and there are similar country atlases in Wales, Northern Ireland and the Isle of Man. In addition to the atlases, we're also the UK node manager for GBIF, which is the Global Biodiversity Information Forum. And that's the, so we share records with the permission of the data providers from the Atlas onto GBIF, which then makes it available globally. We're also the lead for the iNaturalist UK node. That's something that we recently took on along with the Marine Biological Association and the Biological Record Centre. And so many of you probably have heard of iNaturalist and are interested in the flow of records from iNaturalist to iRecord and the NBN Atlas. And we'll mention that in a bit, and I'm happy to answer any questions I can around that data flow. And I just put this here to show sort of the range of members and support and data partners for the NBN and the NBN Atlas. So a big range of different types of organisations, from country agencies to the LERCs, the schemes and societies. Also, we're seeing more museums and adding records to the Atlas as well. But we're here to talk about the NBN Atlas Scotland, so let's focus on that. It was launched in April 2017, along with the main NBN Atlas. The NBN Atlas replaced the NBN Gateway, which was supported by the JNCC. It's an online data portal. I imagine most of you have already accessed it, and a repository for species records. So we accept biodiversity species records. Taxon names are matched with the UK Species Inventory, which is managed by the Natural History Museum in London. And just some bits of information. We accept every record has a license. We accept 3 different licenses, of which 2 are open, which is CC0 and CC BY, and 30% of the records on the NBN Atlas Scotland are on an open license. So that means that 70% of the records are on have a non-commercial attribute, which means that they should not be used for commercial use. And we can talk about how we monitor that usage and what we can do to support cases where it's felt that the license has been breached. We can talk about that later. Each record has a verification status as well, to say whether it's accepted, so if it's accepted or unconfirmed. We've taken the language from iRecord, and I can't remember, I think it's something like 85% of the records on the Scottish Atlas are verified. And we'll come back and show you a bit more information about that later, and also how you can search for records by their verification status as well, or perhaps filter out those records that are not verified, perhaps more important. One thing that catches people out with the atlases is that we accept both Ordnance Survey grid-based records and also coordinate-based locations as well. So the atlas stores records with a coordinate, and so a lat long coordinate. So quite often when you look at the maps, the record will be a dot on a map, and it's important to remember that many of those are actually grid references, and that's also something that we can talk about going forward. We have a list of the 102 sensitive species as defined by Nature Scot. And what that means is that, that when records of those species are processed, their location is blurred. And the level of blurring is defined by Nature Scot. And it can be mostly, it's anywhere between 1 kilometre and to 10 kilometres, although there are some bird species I think there are 4 bird species where their location is blurred to 100 kilometres. And it's also possible to flag an issue on records on the Atlas. So when you are looking at records and you feel that there's a problem, you look at the date and you know that that species perhaps isn't, the phonology is wrong, you can flag an issue, you can make a comment, and that will go to the data provider, and they can either agree with you and realize, yes, it's a mistake, there's a geographical error or an identification error, or they can say, no, it is actually correct. And I'll show you how to do that as well. So I wanted to just talk about the data partners. So these are the number of data partners by their classification of who share records in Scotland. So they're not necessarily Scottish-based data partners, and the majority are the national schemes and societies, but we also have environmental charities, recording groups, the Wildlife Trust, and also the local environmental record centres, as mentioned by Natalie. We're seeing more, as I said, more museums digitising their records. We're having more museum records come online, and also commercial companies, consultancies. We're really trying to encourage consultancies to share their records as well, and that's beginning to happen. In terms of the number of records supplied by the different partners, the national schemes and societies share by far the most records. These are in Scotland, although it's true for across the UK as well. Primarily, this is the BTO, not RSPB, BTO and the BSBI. Yeah, so I think that's enough to say there. On to data flow. So this rather complicated flow diagram tries to illustrate the flow of records around, into and out of the NBN Atlas. And here I'm actually talking about the main Atlas, but it applies to the Scottish Atlas as well. So we don't accept records from individuals. So we don't accept ad hoc records. Ad hoc records, we ask people to place them on iRecord, perhaps more recently iNaturalist as well. If they're actually after an identification, we suggest iNaturalist. If it's more, they know they've made the identification, but they want to have it recorded, we ask them to go to iRecord. And we have a monthly flow of verified records from iRecord into the NBN Atlas. Now they come, there's a URL there that shows the recording schemes and societies and projects as well who share records monthly with the NBN Atlas. Not all schemes and societies share records. So have agreed to have signed up for their records to be shared. So there are some gaps in the taxonomic groups that get shared from iRecord. But this is something that the BRC are actively working on to encourage more of the schemes and societies to share their records. They are also sharing unverified records where the taxon isn't, where there is no recording scheme and society to verify those records. And we can talk more about that in a bit. So we have the flow of records from iRecord into the NBN Atlas. We also do take some records directly from iNaturalist. We have a data set from a project in Northern Ireland and we take those records directly. But otherwise, there is a flow now of research grade records from iNaturalist into iRecord that are then made available to the verifiers within the schemes and societies to verify should they wish. The other automatic or semi-automatic flow of records we have is from the Marine Biological Association's data archive, DASH. And so we've now, in the summer, we agreed that all data sets published from 2019 onwards from DASH will find their way to the NBN Atlas. I'm still working through this procedure because, as it turns out, some of the agencies also already share their records. So I'm trying best not to duplicate some of these data sets, but inevitably it does happen. There is also the flow of records from the NBN Atlas to GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Information Forum. And so we ask anybody who shares, any organisation that shares their records for the Atlas, whether we can send those records on. And most people agree. We are not sharing records from DASH because we believe that they will be shared eventually via OBIS, from OBIS down to GBIF. Yeah, and we can come back to this figure if anyone has any questions. So I wanted to talk about the precision or the resolution of the records on the Atlas, because we receive either records as a grid reference, where so the resolution is clear, or as a lat-long coordinate. And when we receive a lat-long coordinate, we ask that an uncertainty of that coordinate is given to us, so we know the area around that point that the location of the record happened in. So in the Scottish record, for the records on the Scottish Atlas, 2/3 have a resolution of 1 kilometre or higher. As you'll see on this figure, we do have some records that are not, that don't have a resolution. These seem to come from citizen science projects where the record has been entered by a dot on the map, and for some reason we don't get a coordinate uncertainty, and so they just sit there without a grid reference. Because what happens is, if you supply us with a lat-long coordinate, it will be transferred into a grid reference where possible, where the lat-long coordinate covers the OS grid. We do have some, as I said earlier, we do have some records with 100 kilometre resolution. Those are these sensitive species of the four bird species. And record verification status. So 85% of the records on the Scottish Atlas are confirmed. They have a status of accepted, considered correct, or accepted correct. So these are the terms that iRecord use, that we adopted after the Atlas was launched. So there are 3 unconfirmed terms on the Atlas: unconfirmed plausible, unconfirmed not reviewed, and plain unconfirmed. And what I'm trying to do at the moment is, as data sets are updated, I'm asking people who use the unconfirmed option to actually select a plausible or not reviewed, so that we can, what I'd like to be able to do is on the maps and visually, when you're viewing a list of records, identify those records that have not been reviewed, because we are beginning to see more and more unreviewed records on the Atlas, especially coming through from iRecord. And so what I'd like to be able to do is on the maps be able to toggle so that you can so that users can easily filter out those records that have not been reviewed, whereas those that are unconfirmed plausible, I would like just to be able to maybe colour a different colour on the map, but they seem to have it seems more important to be able to separate out the plausible from the not reviewed. And there's a link there that shows the definitions for those, or the terms, and that those definitions come from iRecord. And so I just wanted to show sort of the temporal distribution of records on the Scottish Atlas. And you can see there's quite an increase from the 1970s onwards. And the last sort of 10 years, we've seen a steady 5 million records added over those 5-year groups. With that, we can see a steady increase in the number of species recorded annually on the Atlas, which is now plateauing in the last 10 years. What will be interesting to know is how well are we doing of the species there are in Scotland? How many are we recording? And this is something that we're beginning to look at the gaps in the both the spatial gaps and the taxonomic gaps in our records on the Atlas, so that we can look at the quality and the success of the Atlas over time, as we have more and more data partners sharing more and more records. And finally, to sort of more interesting, what species groups do we have on the NBN Atlas Scotland? And the largest species group are the birds. We have a lot of records from BTO and the RSPB, followed by flowering plants from BSBI. And so this was really just to sort of show the distribution of the records by species groups. And I think in terms of sort of a very quick overview, that's what I've got, and I thought the rest could be a demonstration. And I'm wondering, does anybody have any questions, or should I just? I don't know if there are any questions in the chat. I can't actually see it. The box allows you to search by scientific name, common name, by location, and also grid reference. There are really sort of two separate searches on the Atlas. There's you can search by species and sort of navigate through species names, or you can search by records. And by searching for records, you can also do a location search. But let's just get started with a location. Well, let's start with a species search. So if I search for buzzard, so I've searched for a common name, but I could equally well search for the scientific name as well. Now, if I select the name that I'm interested in, click the name that I'm interested in, I then go through to the species profile page. Oh no, I had a beautiful picture when I last tested this. So there should be a beautiful picture here. So, but it tells the scientific name, the common name, that it's the UKSI, and that it's native. We're still working our way through making sure that all of these are correct. So if you do find your travels around the Atlas, a species that you know is non-native and we've flagged it as native, do let me know. It's an ongoing issue. We have our pictures, and then we also have the default distribution map and of records. So they all appear as points, but they could have been shared. Mostly will have been shared with us on a grid basis. We've got accepted and unconfirmed in different colours, but so the unconfirmed includes those that are plausible as well. And what I can do then is, well, actually, if I scroll down, we have a list of designations that the species is on, and we're also just trying to work our way through these. And if you see any designations that are incorrect, or if you'd like to see any designations that we're missing, please do let me know. And from, actually, just stay on this page for a moment, if there were any more pictures, they would show something. We've lost our pictures today. The names, so all this information comes from the UK SI. We've got the classification, and you can navigate up the classification. Some information on the records. This should really be called charts, because it's a breakdown of the records by Vice County, by data partner who supplied them. So we can see that the British Trust for Ornithology has supplied the majority of these records, and the data set that they came in, and then the distribution, the temporal distribution, either by decade or by month. That's all we've got. But it's a nice breakdown. Literature. This search is the Biodiversity Heritage Library, but also this is a nice bit of information that comes from Cambridge University and the Conservation Evidence Library, and that does a lookup in their library to find where there's conservation work done on the species in question. Sequences, this searches GenBank, and then data partners. This again is another list of the data partners and the data sets. Includes the license, so you'll see that actually all of these BTO data sets are on a CC by NC license, so that's the non-commercial attribute, prevents non-commercial use without prior agreement of the data provider, and then the number of records. And if I go back to the overview tab, then we can click on interactive map or view records. These are just two different views on the records. View records just takes me to the list of records. And if we clicked on in interactive map, we would have gone to this map tab, but let's stay with the records for now. We can filter the records here, and by default, it's only giving us the presence records. So it is possible on the Atlas, and we do have quite a few records from surveys where the recorders have expected to find a species and they haven't, and so they record it as a negative record, as an absence record. To try and minimize confusion, we filter those out by default. We can see the attribution, so the number of records by the different licenses. So the vast majority are on the CC by NC license, but if we wanted to, we could filter by all those that are on a CC0, and we can see just those 12 records. And if I click on the filter name, it removes the filter. If I expand identification, here at the moment we've just got the different verification statuses. So let's say we just want the accepted records. I can click on the 3 accepted terms and say include, and that will filter those records so that I've just got those accepted statuses in my data set. I can remove that. We'll get back to having all of them. and occurrences by month and by year, and basis of record. So the Atlas uses Darwin Core, which is the biodiversity data standard for it's the data standard for biodiversity records. And one of the fields in Darwin Core is the basis of record. And what we'll see is the vast majority of these, and the vast majority on the Atlas, are human observations, which it refers to a field observation. Someone's gone out and surveyed, and they've made this record. But we are getting more and more preserved specimens. So these are the herbarium or natural history collection records that I mentioned that we're getting more and more of. But let's say you just wanted field records, you can click on the link and you'll just get those field observations. There are other options, but to minimize the load on the Atlas, it's only possible to have check 8 at a time. So 8 possible ways of filtering the records. So you can, if you're interested in something else, so you want to look at the Watsonian Vice counties, are interested in grid size, the precision, the resolution of the records, you can change the available filters. And now this is telling me that I've got too many filters, and please untick one or more. So let me take out the identification verification status. I click update. I apologise if you can hear the cat and the boy. And we can filter by Watsonian Vice County. And let's say we were just interested in a few of the vice counties, you can select them and include them. Or if you didn't want those records, you could exclude them, and that would exclude those checked options. In the same way with grid size, let's have a look at the distribution of records across the grid sizes. So this is a grid size in metre, so 1 metre 10. And let's say that we were only interested in 1 kilometre or less. And we filter those, and we'll see that we have records that have 1 kilometre or higher. Oh, there we go. And I clicked on the record. So yeah, so we can view the records on the map by default. It shows using the variable grids. And so you can, as you scroll in, zoom in even, you should see the names of the grid references. And what you can do is then click on a particular grid reference, and we know that there are 49 occurrences in that grid reference, and we can click to view all of them. And so that's another way of actually filtering down to be able to view those. And we click back on records and we can view those records, or we can just view them on the map at the 1 kilometre scale. Because you could, because of the records that are actually stored in the Atlas as latitude and longitude points, we can display the records as points. And there they are, but you can actually see that they are all on a regular grid. So these records have all been supplied, most likely on the 1 kilometre grid. You can actually colour them by, I wonder what we could colour them by. Let's try by year. Can I get rid of this? I can. There we go. So that's better. And then I've coloured them by year. And so if I click on here, we can see what the colours refer to. It's not so easy when there are so many options. We can try grid size as well. They're all a kilometre. And so a current status is whether it's a presence or absence record. Has user assertions is the flag an issue if you identify a problem, and we'll come back to that. You can colour by identification verification status. They're all accepted, considered correct. So these are sort of the options you can to colour the records when you view them as points. And I'm not quite sure know that anything's happening there, but I think most people, just viewing them by variable grids is the most useful. And I think you should be able to scroll in further to even further identify the records as well. It also has the charts as well. And it has some additional charts here by family. I think we're still just viewing the buzzard. So the family, genus, but license. So we can see that there are 3 records on an OGL license. The rest are all on CC BY and C, but we can look at the distribution by month, decade, and well, they're all in Murray. Record images, no images for these, and then the overview and download. And what we're trying to do here is to make it really clear that there are 46 records with us on an NC license, and that you can easily exclude those non-commercial records if you're going to use them from a commercial use and you haven't got prior permission. So you can exclude them easily. It's also possible to exclude any unconfirmed identifications, any absence records, and also any fossil records. We tried to make it a bit easier to understand exactly the records that you've got when you download. And then if you're happy with your selection, you can then download from there, but I won't go through the download process. If we look on a particular record, and it gives us some more information, it gives us the occurrence ID. This is the unique ID as supplied by the data provider, the grid reference, including the long, and quite often the recorded by is withheld. So withheld means you need to contact the data provider to find out who recorded it. We do have data sets where the organism was dead at the time of the recording or collection. So this is a new term that we added recently. Information on the data set, the date, and right down the bottom, we've got we match the records to political boundaries, habitat layers, etc. So that's what this information tells us, and this helps us search. And what I wanted to draw attention to was the flag an issue. So, oh, I'm not logged in. So I flag it, and you can. Quite often what I find myself doing is looking at the atlas and seeing terrestrial species that are in the water. So I say it's a geospatial issue and that the location must be wrong. That will send a message to the data partner and also to me and Katie, and we will do what we can to resolve that issue. So that was, I think I'm going very slowly as well. We've only got 15 minutes left. So you can search here under species, and let's search for slow worm. And what I just wanted to show you quickly, the species search, I didn't select the name slow worm. If I selected the name from the drop down, I would have gone back to that species page. But here, this gives me a match of all the taxa matching slow, and it tells me where I've matched it as well. But of course, slow worm is really the one I was after, and that that's the one at the top. You can download this list. So if you're interested in, say, all plant names in the UKSI, you can do a search, and it's a really nice way of actually accessing the UKSI. And actually that didn't work at all. So if I go, this is what I wanted to do. So all life forms, all plants, and you can download, and you'll get a nicely formatted with the taxonomic hierarchy of all the plant names in the UKSI. And this filtering works very much like the records does as well. You can, I've filtered by plants, but I can also say I just want the native plants, and I also just want those that have been flagged in the UKSI as being freshwater. And again, and then I can download those. I think I need to speed up. I want to show the location search. So there are several ways of searching, and I think probably the most useful probably is to do a polygon search. So I scroll into the area that you're interested in and just draw a polygon around the area that you're interested in. It gives you the species count, tells you the number of occurrence records. You click on the link, and then you're back into the familiar view of the list of records. Again, it's filtered out the absence records. Let's say you were interested in those absence records. You can click them and you will get all the absence records as well, although I don't know that there were any. And it will tell you the name, common name, the data resource, where it came from, and the date. We have spatial layers. We have predefined layers already set up and the records sampled against on the atlas. And we've got quite a few here. We've got individual local authorities. So you can click on either the name here or the boundary on the atlas and click on Highland. This takes us to a slightly different view of the records, where they're broken down by species group. And within these, I can just ask for all the bats. I can see the list of species. I can see the map, the points on the maps with the unconfirmed and accepted. I can download the records directly, or I can go and view those records. And again, I'm back in the familiar view of the records. If I know that actually I only want Highland Biological Recording Group's records, I can click on those as well. So that, and there are several other, a few other predefined areas: environmentally sensitive areas, national nature reserves, national parks, and we try and keep these up to date as best we can when they do change, so we're not always notified when they do. And so we can click again, West of Scotland, marine area, all the records there, and again have a look at the mammals. There are no mammals. Quite sure. Okay. There we go. You can see what those records are, and again, click to view them. How are we doing? You can also do a search by grid ref, so I could put NT36 search, and that takes me into the same view. you can do this search by grid reference also from the homepage as well, but you can then also put in the name. So good. And change the radius. So the default is a 5 kilometre radius, and we change it to a 2 kilometre radius. And again, I can click to view all the records, or I can filter down, navigate down so that I've just got the insects, and then view those records as well. And click to view those selected records. So that's search by polygon. So I think what I wanted to draw your attention to as well is we do now have a new advanced search, but unfortunately it's not available yet on the Scottish Atlas. But I just wanted to show you. So this is the this is on the main UK Atlas, and within the next couple of weeks we will add this to the Scottish Atlas. There are just a few tweaks, a few changes that we'll need to make it appropriate for the Scottish Atlas, but every record has a unique ID. If you know the unique ID of the record, you can put it in here and search, and it will take you to it. There are different data sets. The ID needs to be unique within a data set, but it might not be unique across data sets. So you might get more than one record returned. You can search by event ID or survey, the survey key from Recorder 6, and the connection code or the sample key in from Recorder 6. Again, those are 3 individual searches that you can do. But you can also search, and then this is a sort of an advanced search where you can search on more than one field. The taxon name, the UKSI, if you TVK, if you know it. Perhaps you're only interested in preserved specimens, you can check all of the others, just preserved specimens. Any identification verification status, or perhaps just the accepted, or perhaps just the unconfirmed. You can do a fuzzy search on the identified by or recorded by if you're only trying to find your records. You can search by data partners. So let's say I just want the records from the Balfour Brown Club. The license. This is you can search by GB reference. Not appropriate for Scotland, but it does cover the Irish grid as well. So this is where we would like. We need to reduce the list options for the Scottish Atlas, and we won't need Bice County of Ireland. And then this is the bit that I think is really, really useful, and it's the date search. You can then search by any year, any month, or any day, or you can search on a year range, and you can filter change the years and do a search, and it tells us that it's waiting. Right. So that's not done anything, that's just returned everything. That's a shame. Let's try that again. Don't know why that didn't work. Obviously we've only just launched it last week, so we still have, oh, there we go. So these are all preserved specimens that are unconfirmed and have an open license within this year. So if you know what you're looking for, you can be quite specific in these searches in a way that just wasn't possible before. And I will write a note on the forum when we make this search available on the Scottish Atlas. And I think we've got 5 minutes, and maybe we should try the questions. I haven't left very much time for questions, sorry.